Hey everybody, we're going to be talking about theme today. We're going to use our strategy taking care to learn how to identify theme in a overall message that the author is trying to tell the reader. So what that is the lesson or the moral of the story is what we've learned it as before in class or just in the past in third grade. The thing to remember about theme is that sometimes it is a little difficult to find because you're looking for the lesson that the author learned in the story, but the lesson also has to apply to life. So and it also has to be, so that means it has to be universal and it has to be something that everyone can relate to and not just the characters in the story. Okay, so what theme is not? It's not specific to the story. It's not something you liked about the book, and it's not something that you can always find right in the text, although sometimes you can find it in the text. So some themes that you heard of before maybe are never judge a book by its cover, think before you act. I'm not going to read all of these, but we've seen and talked about theme before, and these are just some ideas to give you what we're looking for when we speak about theme. The thing to notice about this is not once do you see a specific person's name if I were to like think about anything that I notice or wonder about the different types of themes that I'm looking at. How do we find it? So we take care. So I'm just going to briefly go over the questions and then we're going to go deeper into them as we go through the lesson. But when we are thinking about theme and we take care, we first want to consider the C, which are the changes of the character. So how does the character change from the beginning of the story to the end of the story? Then we want to look to see if there is any advice given in the passage to the character. So maybe somebody's telling the character to slow down, just some kind of advice, but the advice should pertain to the lesson or the theme of the story. So the advice should help you make sense of the theme. Repetition. Are there any repeated words, symbols, or ideas repeated in the book or the text that could lead us to the theme? So that could be just the same phrase over and over, and then you have to ask yourself, why are they repeating that phrase over and over? What is the purpose of them repeating that phrase? And see if it applies to the theme that you have in your head. Epiphanies. I define epiphanies as aha moments. So they're called moments of clarity. But what I mean by that is anytime that you're learning some kind of lesson and you finally get it, that's an epiphany. The epiphany is a moment of understanding. So is there any moment of understanding in the passage or the text that helps you understand the lesson that the character learned that can apply to most of the story? Then we're going to go to what's most important about this. So one thing to know is that you're not going to see all the C.A.R.E elements when you look for the theme. So you're not going to actually find each element. So the one that you should see though is at least some sort of change. Even if the change doesn't happen, you should see the character either go from sad to I'm considering how I should be if I was once sad. So maybe I should be happy. Or the character could go from angry and upset or a bully to someone who is a nice friend to everyone. Look for those changes to help you understand how those changes apply to the theme. And those are probably the most important questions in the C.A.R.E element. So let's look at an example really quickly so we can walk through the C.A.R.E element. I want you to pause your screen here so that you can read the entire text, and I'm going to make it fit to page. When you pause the screen, it should help you read the text, the dog days, and we're going to go through the C.A.R.E element. So as you read, before you pause, as you read, I want you to consider taking care. Here are the C.A.R.E elements. Are there any changes? Is there any advice, any repetition, or any epiphanies? These are the questions that you want to think about as you read through this passage. So go ahead, pause the screen, consider the questions. All right, hopefully you paused the screen and we're back. You should have been ready to walk through the questions. So the questions are, how did C.A.R.E change from the beginning of the story to the end of the story, and what did she learn? So when we look at C.A.R.E, we know, what did C.A.R.E want more than anything in the story? She wanted I'm gonna pause and let you think about the answer, but she wanted a dog. Now, when she wanted a dog, and her idea about the dog is that the dog would be pretty easy to have. Okay, so that's how Kara feels in the beginning. But when we go to the end, we notice Kara doing a lot of work. We notice that she's, taking care of the dog. She has to feed the dog. She has to make sure that it goes to the vet. She has to pick up after the dog if it makes any mistakes. She has to, she gets in trouble for the dog making the mistakes. So we notice that Kara, it's easy peasy, and then at the end, it seems like she's doing a lot of work. So, is there any advice given? What advice did her friend Josh give her before she got the dog? Josh told her that she needs to consider, the responsibilities before she gets the dog. Let's go to his specific words. He says, just be sure you really want one, is what Josh tells her. So, there it is. It won't let me highlight it like I want to, but you see right here, just be sure you really want one. So when we think about what it means to just be sure we really want one, our parents tell us that when they're saying you better want that, it's almost like when you say, can I have, maybe if you're in your household, if you ask for more leftovers and they think that you're being greedy, they say you better want that, because they're going to make you eat it all. So like with the dog, what do you think it means by just saying just be sure you really want one? If you don't know now, the idea is that that she was given some sort of advice. So let's pause on that question and go to repetition. Were there any repeating words or symbols? Now, I didn't hear any repeating words or symbols, but maybe you did. And if you did, I hope that you're not talking about words such as the or and or Kara's name or the dog or Josh's name, because those are just words along in the passage. Remember, repetition has to be words or symbols that may be important to the theme. So that means they help you understand the theme. Now let's go to epiphanies. Now let's think about Kara in the beginning of the story and the end of the story. Remember, an epiphany is an aha moment. So if we add all our Kara elements up, in the beginning, remember we talked about Kara being very ready to have a dog. She was really eager. She felt like it would be nothing, it was probably going to be easy. Now remember, Josh tells her, make sure she really wants it. So remember, he's telling her, consider everything when you get this dog. As we move further in the story, we can go look at the story itself actually. And it says, she unleashed the dog in the house. It growled at the new owners for a while, knocked down the mother's favorite vase. So that's really hard. Then it says the Kara spent the next few weeks picking up after the dog, taking him to training classes, cleaning out his kennel, and buying food. She says, man, she said 1 month later, this is rough. So at first she had really wanted a dog. And then we see at the end, she says, this is rough, after Josh telling her to consider, be sure she really wants a dog. So we see that her epiphany is that she realizes it's a little harder than she thought it was going to be. Now, based on all of those things that we've read about, all of those things that we've talked about and that we've discussed, what do we think the theme could be? Now let's check up against so that's just the class discussion there. If you want to pause and see if we were really on the right track and just see the evidence that they were given, just go ahead and read that. But we've talked through it and I've talked through this slide. So what's the theme based on our finds? So hopefully you are thinking of some things in your head now. And if you did, hopefully you came up with something like this, like things aren't always as easy as they seem. Remember, in the beginning, Kara believed that having a dog was easy, but at the end, she actually admits that it's rough. And the advice that her friend gave her, that's just a little more evidence to help you bring that theme on home. You must be responsible in order to get what you want. So responsible, think about the things that Kara had to do to take care of the dog. She had to feed the dog, she had to take the dog to the vet, she had to train the dog, and she really wanted it, but she still was required to be responsible. It was a job. Just because you want something doesn't mean that it's going to be easy, and that's a lesson that we can learn both in life and that we can learn also in the story with Kara. So that's the same thing that I should have pointed out about things aren't always as easy as they seem. It's not specific to Kara. It's not specific to the situation, but it does describe the lesson that the situation taught. Not that it's not specific to the situation. It does describe the lesson that Kara learned without actually mentioning Kara's name. Both of those do. And be careful what you wish for. It's the same. You must be responsible in order to get what you want, and be careful what you wish for. When we wish for things, sometimes they're not what we think that they're going to be. She probably thought having a dog was going to mean she was going to be in La La Land, but La La Land was not the place she was going to go. So here's some things that are good to know. Remember when we were talking and I was telling you that the things that we saw before weren't specific to the story? So when we look at this particular examples here, notice that Fiona ignored her peers who had old tattered clothes. We consider that a bad theme because it cannot be specific to the story. Theme cannot be specific to the story. So that means it should not mention a character's name. It should literally describe the lesson that they learned. Never judge a book by its cover. So this would be a better thing for what Fiona did because she looked at somebody and automatically made an assumption about them. So she automatically assumed that a person with poor clothes, if their clothes look bad, she was not talking to them. So she was very judgmental. Never judge a book by its cover. Jason practiced and got better. Jason may have done that in a story. So we haven't read these stories. These are just made up things to show you the difference between a good theme and a bad theme. So Jason may have made those stories. May have practiced and got better. But practice makes perfect is better because that theme is naming Jason's name. He probably did practice and he got better, but that doesn't apply to the real world. Jason is not at my house practicing and getting better, but I can learn from the idea that practice makes perfect. That's a good one. Not specific to the story, doesn't have a name, but can be used in any situation. Okay, so let's keep moving forward. So theme is for everyone. That's why it has to be used in every situation. I've already discussed this, but I want you to take this idea where the story takes place in its own small world, but the theme is for the big world that we live in. So the story takes place in that passage, but when we learn theme, I have to make sure that it could be something that can apply to real everyday life. Get it? Got it? Got it. Good. Okay, so let's think of another way to think about things. So we're going to imagine that Kelly and Brad are characters in a fiction book called Stories from Valley High. It's by Erica Willing, apparently. There's Kelly, there's Brad. So this book is Jenna's favorite. She thinks she knows what the theme is and she plans to tell her friends. So here's what theme she thinks it is. She tells them that the theme of this book is that Kelly and Brad learn to become friends despite their differences. Now, is this a good theme or not? And can you tell me why or why not? Go ahead, take some think time and think about that answer. Hopefully, if you pause the screen, and if you didn't pause the screen, that's okay. But if you did pause the screen, hopefully you thought about some things that we just talked about. Remember, theme is not a good theme because it's not books that her friends have read. So they don't know who Kelly and Brad are. They can't apply this to their lives and it's too specific to the story. So her theme, I'm going to go back for you guys. Look at it. It mentions their names, Kelly and Brad, and it tells what Kelly and Brad learned. So the story may have done these things. It probably was in the story. But if I say Kelly and Brad learned to become friends despite their differences, that's not giving me a moral of a story or a lesson to a story that I can apply in everyday life. So what could I have done and said? So instead, Jenna tries, not me, Jenna tries, the theme of this book is that you can sometimes find friendships in those who are different from you. So why is this one better than the other one? Take a second and pause the screen and think about that answer. Why is this one better than the other? Hopefully you decided that it was better because it's something that we all can relate to. So in this particular story, in this particular story that is about Brad and I think it was about Brad and Kelly. In this story about Brad and Kelly, even though it's about Brad and Kelly, when we learn about the theme of a story, we want to make sure that we're not being specific to those characters. So I know that Brad and Kelly became friends, even though they were two different people. I have to show that the theme is not specific to just Brad and Kelly, but that I can also come out here and say to another friend, like, hey, from this book, I learned that no matter who I am, no matter who you are, we can still be friends. It doesn't matter what kind of differences we have. And that's how you learn the lesson or the moral of the story. Make it applying theme to my everyday life. And that's what I want you guys to see there. So, like I said again, it's something that we all can relate to. All right, so we're going to look at some more examples here. And as we look at the examples, you're going to come up with the theme. So here's an example. Pause the screen so you can read it. And what I'm going to do is after you read the story, I'm going to reveal the answer to you so you can have a practice question here. Let's go over Caught Red-Handed. What you should have noticed is that in the beginning of the story, you notice that Ryan has a lot going on. He has a lot going on, but he has this test. When he doesn't get to study for this test because of his responsibilities, Ryan decides to cheat. He gets caught, and so are there any changes from Ryan in the beginning of the story to the end of the story? He had a test. Here are the changes. They are not specific to his attitude, but they're about what Ryan had to do. So Ryan had a test. He cheated on his test and he was caught. Okay, so that's the changes from the beginning of the story to the end of the story. So they don't always have to deal with attitude. So the next thing that you should see here is, was there any advice given? Hopefully you noticed Ryan's teacher had gave him advice. After Ryan was honest and stated that it was no excuse that he was so busy, even though he gave an honest answer, his teacher says, thanks for being honest. Then here's the advice. He says, be sure to manage both your school life and your home life well. So Ryan, you see the changes that happened with Ryan, and then you should see the advice given. And then we will go into the repetition. What's repetition? And I think you guys would talk about the repetition being the word test. Test is repeated in the story, but it is not a symbol or phrase that helps you understand the theme or the lesson of the story. And that's what you should understand about that. So we're going to go on. Now, are there any epiphanies that Ryan has? I think he does, because after he was told that thank you for being honest, and he says he was given that advice, his teacher says he can retake the test. And what does Ryan do? Ryan goes right home and he studies. So now we want to put together all of those things. What does Ryan learn based on the things that have happened in this passage? If we go through our C.A.R.E elements, if I was Ryan and I noticed that my life is so busy that it's taking away from my responsibilities, I would probably have to say that I should speak up when I need help. Or I would also have to say, use better time management. Those are the types of themes that we would have to think about, because we see, if I'm a kid and my time is always being taken up by my responsibilities, then that means that I am not managing my time well. And so that means I have to think about, like, what am I doing? I still have to study. I probably should talk to my parents, who would get mad at me, and tell them, hey, I don't have time to study. I need to study for my test on Monday. So I should speak up when I need help, because maybe his parents would have been understanding. But let's go down here and check some answers to see if I'm even on the right track. So here's some things and here are not some things. So one of the things they say is Ryan is too busy. We know that this is specific to the story because you don't want to mention the character's name. There's no sense in mentioning the character's name. And here we have honesty is the best policy. I didn't mention the honesty portion of that, but that is a theme that we can learn, because what we saw was when Ryan mentions that he did cheat and he says he was just entirely too busy, his teacher says, take care of your business, but I will let you retake the test. Him being honest is the reason why he got to retake the test. Susan usually studies. We can't make this the theme of the story, is because we can't relate Susan's life to the story, because we aren't talking about Susan and this is not the theme. The story barely mentions Susan as one of the characters in the story. She's a minor character. And so you want to think about the story, you want to think about the lesson that the main character is learning, the main character. Mr. Fraser is a fair teacher. Once again, Mr. Fraser is a fair teacher, but that's not the theme that we learn. If we were to learn something from Mr. Fraser, it would be always be fair. And so what Mr. Fraser was doing there was that he was saying, I'm going to be fair to you because you were honest. You tried to tell me what was really going on. And so I'm going to give you a chance. But once again, we only want to think about the theme when it comes to a specific character if a question asks us that. But most of the time we want to pay attention to the main character when we think about our themes. Always take time to study. So the theme is that this is a theme because it deals with real world. It applies to Ryan's life. He was too busy to study, but he needed to take that time. He probably needed to communicate, talk to his parents, or think about the time that he had and the times that he could actually study. He needed to take time to study. This deals with Ryan just like it deals with if I were in my everyday life, I would have to take time to plan out lessons. That would be a lesson that I would learn as a teacher. Hopefully this was helpful to you guys. I want to do a quick review just to give you the go over what we've been talking about. Remember, theme is the message that the author is trying to convey to the reader. It's not always just found in the text you have to search for, but sometimes it is mentioned in the passage. It is also something that everyone can relate to. So you want to think about theme as, what did I learn from the story if I were that character? And don't forget to take care. I hope you guys have a great